Hello, I'm Christine Zips, founder of Zips Media and Wired Schools. And today we're holding our August meeting for the SAGS group, which stands for Safer Alternatives to Government Schools. And we have with us today now two presenters. Alex Newman, keynote presenter. He just finished up, and you'll find his recording in the full-length version as well as his own. But now we are starting with our next speaker, who is Colleen Prayne. And Colleen Prayne is a third-generation Coloradan, a native, and a mom of three boys. Oh boy. And she's been homeschooling since 2012. One of Colleen's deepest desires is to serve and empower homeschoolers. She founded my Homeschool Hub in 2018 to help you in your homeschool journey. And just as a personal note, I had the pleasure of knowing Colleen for the last couple of years. We leaned on her umbrella school services when we helped homeschool a young lady the last 2 years, and she's just awesome, such great service. But today, Colleen will cover the legal ways to homeschool in Colorado, and she'll touch upon other states, I understand, and the forms that you should sign and those you shouldn't. So welcome, Colleen, to our meeting. We look forward to hearing you presentation. You have the floor.
Thank you, Christine. I appreciate you inviting me into your space today. And it's nice to meet you face to face for the first time, because we've talked on the phone a lot.
I know.
And we've done a lot of
emailing. I can't
emailing.
believe we haven't done this yet, but that's fantastic. So,
well, thank you for having me here.
Our pleasure.
So there's different ways to homeschool legally, and it depends on the state that you're in. So I'll speak to Colorado first, because that's where my homeschool hub is based out of, and that's where the majority of homeschoolers are that I support. Within the state of Colorado, there are 3 ways. I'll start with the third, because that one is what doesn't apply to most people. And that's if you have an active teacher's license in Colorado, then you don't have to report anything. You don't have to do any assessments or testing, as long as you keep that active the teacher's license active. So we can put that aside for the majority of homeschoolers. So for the rest of us, you can either file what's called a notice of intent. You'll hear people say NOI. You might hear people say LOI for letter of intent. Those are used interchangeably. And what that entails is sending in a letter to any school district of your choice within the state. And the law is very specific for what that letter should include: names of children, ages of children, the address where the homeschool will take place, and the number of hours that you'll be homeschooling that year. And then you need to keep other documents on file as far as attendance, test scores. You need to keep basic records of the things that you're doing within your homeschool, and then your vaccine information. So that's the notice of intent. With a notice of intent, you are submitting to the local, whichever school district, a local in Colorado, their school district's authority, where if the superintendent had just cause to demand your records, you would have to produce those within 14 days. I don't like to say that in a way to scare people, because it's not common that happens, but people should fully understand that if it came down to it and they requested it, you would have to comply with that and give that information over to them. Some families aren't comfortable with that and like to keep their information more private, and that's where a lot of people opt to go with umbrella schools. At that point, the information is strictly between the family and the umbrella school. And then each umbrella school is considered a private school, so you shift out of homeschool law and over to private school law. And then each umbrella school sets their own policies as far as things like attendance records, submitting that, tests or assessments, things like that. And then the information that they collect, maybe it could be the curriculum that you use. Some of them require summaries of what you're doing. We all require different things. So on my website, myhomeschoolhub.com, you can go to the Colorado tab, and there's a breakdown of those 3 different ways and a list of the pros and cons to each method of homeschooling. So you can look at that and consider what's right for your family. If you want to go with an NOI, I encourage everybody to contact school districts first and find out how they house your data. That's a big deal to me, is data and what information they have on our families and what they're doing with it and who has access to it. So on my website, under the NOI section, you can find a list of questions to ask before you decide which school district to submit your information to. Remember, you can send it to any school district in the state. You don't have to send that to your own. If you don't want to deal with all of those things, then the umbrella school is a great option because it's completely private between you and that umbrella school. It also gives more support. So for example, I have families who may never talk to me if they don't want me to be involved. And then I have some families that message me sometimes on a weekly basis. We have a team of mentor moms that people can get help for. We have a high school guidance counselor that if you want help with planning high school transcripts, diplomas, things like that, college admissions, we do all of that. So the umbrella school lends more support than what just filing a notice of intent does. With that, regarding forms, this is where we get into an area of caution. If you decide to withdraw your student from school, or if you decide you want to follow a notice of intent, and if a school or a school district comes back with a notice of intent form and tells you to do this, you do not have to fill out this form. The law does not provide in any way for a notice of intent form to be completed. The law states specifically that you are to write the letter. And so on a lot of the forms, what we're seeing on these forms that school districts are just making up, they're collecting a lot more information than what is required by law for us to submit through the notice of intent. And on some of them, I've even seen in some schools that are on military installations, they're asking for housing in like more direct housing information, and if parents are deployed and if parents are serving, and it's very intrusive information that they don't need to know. The schools districts don't have that business according to the state law. So before you ever sign any forms, stop and look and see what the law actually provides for, if you are required to sign a form or if you are allowed to write your own letter. It's always better to write your own letter, because then you're speaking in your own words. You're giving only the information that the law requires. And basically what you're doing, it's a mindset. It's notifying them of you exercising your right. Whereas if you're filling out a form, it starts to chip away at your mindset of freedom, and it trains people to then think that they need to ask the school district's permission to exercise their rights. And that's how they start chipping away at our freedoms. When they provide forms that are optional, that seem easier, that are going to save you time, and, oh, it's the same information, why don't I just go out and fill the form? Over time, it erodes at our freedoms, because then it trains people to start handing over the forms. And then they add more information to the forms and data that they're collecting from us. That's not even, there's not provision in the law for that. So always be wary of the forms that they're asking you to sign and see if it's even legally required. And if you have questions, you can reach out you can contact me. If you have questions, I'm happy to look at it. You can contact HSLDA. They're a great organization. Heritage Defense is another fantastic organization. They're based out of Texas that helps homeschoolers and takes care of that. So always just double check. If you have forms that they give you when you want to withdraw your students from school, read the fine print and see if there's anything that you are agreeing to or making a statement of that you don't agree with. You can always cross out those sections and say, I don't agree with this. I do not consent to this. If you have to sign the form, just be very careful of the forms. So I think that's about it as far as the forms go. For homeschooling legally, if you're not in Colorado, the way you can find out how to homeschool legally, what's required, the website that Alex just mentioned sounds like they have information for all the states. That sounds like a fantastic resource. You can also go to the Department of Education's website for whichever state you're looking at, and you can do a search for homeschool, or you can Google state name homeschool Department of Education, and then you can actually read the statutes. It's good to look at resources that are out there, but reading the law directly, there's no replacement for that, because then you know with your own mind exactly what the law states, and you can speak to your freedoms and you can advocate for yourself much better, and you can be a stronger advocate for your family when you really understand what the law specifically states. So I think that's it, unless there are any questions or unless you have anything else you'd like me to cover, Christine.
Boy, Colleen, like Alex, I think you both have taken the same vitamins and supplements this morning. I need to get some of those. So just an outstanding job, as always. Thank you so much. I think that's very comprehensive, but I open this up to our participants, our attendees, to jump in and ask Colleen any questions you may have. You just unmute your video or just your audio if you prefer. Or you can post it in chat. I'll keep a lookout to see what we have here.
I'm kind of in a unique position. I've got 2 little granddaughters. They go to Denver public schools. Mom is a Denver public school teacher. And I told Chris this a couple of weeks ago that, this is probably a month ago, that my little 6-year-old granddaughter looked at me and she said, "I wished I was a boy." And I just, how do you handle stuff like that? I mean, do I have any chance of trying to change anything?
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
Yes, that was directed at you, I believe.
Okay. I would say a lot of kids, like little girl tomboys, they might say that just because they want to go climb a tree. It doesn't have to be something where they legitimately want to change their gender, especially for the long haul. But they are getting this information at school, and it is very aggressive. And so I would say, just to keep that line of communication open and try and understand deeper, I would just say, tell me more about that. And try to find out why. Is it because she's just a tomboy and she just wants to go play the tough games with the boys at recess? Or is there something deeper going on where they've started making her question things, and then you can have an honest conversation with her mom about your concerns once you really understand what's going on in her little mind and what she's saying and what's influencing her? Because it could be a very innocent thing, but then it also could be a very serious thing.
Thank you. And, Chris kind of actually mentioned that to me. So I think I'm going to do that. So I thank you guys for your advice.
Excellent advice and wonderful question, Virginia. It's one that's plaguing so many parents and grandparents these days. I can absolutely understand that. And I think, I think one of the best ways to start or continue or explore any conversation is why. Because like you say, when they might say something like, how do you make a clock or something? And you go into telling them how to make a clock when they just really wanted to know what time it was, or something like that. But yeah, you just kind of need to be careful to find out, why are they asking the question, and then let it unfold and deal with it as it unravels. But great advice. Absolutely. And any final thoughts, Colleen? Questions from anyone else before we move to we can invite a general meeting. Anyone want to share?
I had homeschooled my oldest son for several years before he started kindergarten. And then once COVID hit, we homeschooled for a couple of years. We sent him back to public school. My husband actually works in the school system in the IT field. So we felt like we kind of had so to speak. But, he was just coming home every day, stressed out. I really felt like it was a lot to do with the fact that they weren't outside enough, and that they were just, getting a lot of just super structured, not very accommodating for learning various subjects. He just started private school today, actually. I'd love to be able to homeschool him, but he is more on board with wanting to be in a school setting. And I just wanted to see what your experience is. Do you have experience with people whose children would rather be with other children their age, and how to maybe kind of, get them to sort of shift or be able to homeschool? Any thoughts on that?
Colleen, do you want to take that? I have some thoughts
Sure.
on that too, but go ahead. Why don't you start there?
Can you tell me again how old he is?
He's 8, so
He's
third grade.
So third grade. So in third grade, things are still pretty fun in school, and they have very nostalgic memories of going to school and playing with friends, and it's a positive thing, and the homework isn't too much, and the busy work hasn't really started. So I can see why a lot of kids like the idea of going to school. There are different homeschooling methods that you'll want to look at and learn about. And he might be somebody who likes a traditional method, and that's where there are more worksheets and textbooks, and it looks like it's more structured, like what a public school might be. So maybe that's one way that he might like to do it. There are other ways of doing it. There's classical education, Charlotte Mason, unschooling, unit studies, Thomas Jefferson. There's really 10 primary different ways to do that. And on my website, you can read about those. If you go to myhomeschoolhub.com and go to homeschool help, you can go to the styles and methods, and you can maybe find one that will suit your family. If you've tried homeschooling in the past or tried learning at home, you might find one that you can do differently than what you did before that might suit him better. For the social time, there are lots of co-ops, and there's public school programs that if you're not opposed to that, you can put them in for 1 day a week. Sometimes 2 days a week. There's lots of different activities that they can do to get the social time. Maybe that's the cup that he needs filled. If he's an extrovert and he just needs to be around people to get recharged, then he might be content doing studies at home as long as he has a place to go fill that social outlet. So that would be, is he an extrovert? That would be my first question.
Not exactly.
Okay.
He's more of a kind of a serious sort of introverted one friend kind of a guy.
Okay.
Not necessarily, the extrovert that you would think of. So that's, it's kind of interesting to me that he would rather be in that setting.
Is it the structure that he likes?
It might be. It could be the structure and just being with other kids. I think he has a younger brother, and he's 5 years younger. So I think that whole dynamic is maybe a little difficult when he's trying to learn, and his 3-year-old brother is doing his thing.
Sure.
So
sure. Is he gifted?
Yeah.
Is he exceptional? Would you think? Like, does he pick up on tasks or information and process concepts quickly? Does he have a good vocabulary?
He has a great vocabulary. He's reading like 300 and 400 page novels, all summer long in third grade. But in terms of so they did the little tests for gifted, and he didn't, score on the gifted spectrum. But I mean, I think he's incredibly bright. So yeah. And it's
those tests,
standardized tests.
The test can be an off day. He could be uncomfortable with the person that's issuing, those tests, one-time testing that he's not gifted. I wouldn't necessarily write it off at that point. I would explore that possibly a little bit more. It sounds to me like he might like the intellectual challenge. He might want to be challenged more and have that structure. And if he's type A and he likes to have things in order, then the order of the classroom might be something that appeals to him. Mm-hmm. Knowing what to expect might be something that appeals to him, which you could produce at home. And that's more of that traditional style, or maybe another style with a lot of literature. If he likes to read, that's where Charlotte Mason or classical education could come into place, because there's a lot of reading within those, a lot of discussion, things like that. Is he stronger with English and history, or with math and science? What's his natural bent go towards?
He's actually stronger in math. Well, in terms of it's hard to say. He does very well in math. In the reading comprehension, on his test grades last year, they weren't as strong, but like I said, he's reading 300 and 400 pages books, 15 of them all summer long. So it's a little hard for me to really assess. I feel like he's pretty strong in both, but just the reading comprehension part is maybe a little more difficult for him, but when he's tested on it, I guess.
Well, and that's an easy skill to develop if he's reading and then you have him verbally tell you things. In Charlotte Mason, that's called narration or telling back. And you have the student read, and then you have them tell you back what they understood and what they gathered. And it's a great way to start understanding what he understands and how his mind is processing and how you can help him or ask questions. It's a really powerful teaching tool. Just hearing this, I think that he is very smart. I think that he probably inside of himself is hungry to learn. I think that he probably wants to have that stimulation that a classroom setting might appear to him to bring, of learning all the time, but there's a lot of dead time. I think that if you could figure out a way to do it, I think that he would thrive and he would really love homeschooling if you could find a way to balance that little brother and him having his independent space to work, but then also a place where he can connect, even if it's just with that one friend, and maybe to have some outside activities. I think that he would do very well with it. But he sounds to me like he could be gifted, and I would maybe explore that a little more than just that one assessment. I wouldn't write it off.
Are there any resources for that or ways that I might be able to?
There are a lot. Our high school guidance counselor is actually very experienced with gifted kids, and she has a lot of resources. You could spend an hour. I mean, you could talk to her as long as you want. An hour to talk to her is available. It's $50 an hour, and you could pick her brain and pull her brain apart, and she could share tons of resources with you to learn about gifted kids and then how to support them. Her daughter is exceptionally gifted, like mind-blowing, the things that she's accomplished and she's done. And Pamela Wilcox is our high school guidance counselor. She also, I very much recommend talking with her. I've been wanting to add her services that she provides for gifted consults and gifted mentorship. I just haven't had time to add that to the services that we provide yet, but you could definitely connect with her.
That would be great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your insight.
Anytime. I'm happy to talk anytime you want to talk.
Wonderful. I think Virginia might have a question here for you again.
Do a lot of parents find it kind of intimidating to go in and fill out this paperwork? And is there any kind of a guide that's out that could maybe help them to research it before they go in to fill out the information? Or
well, they shouldn't be going in to fill out any information because they can write the letter at home and they can mail it wherever they want. So when they fill out the notice of intent, it's recommended that they send the letter certified mail so that they get a receipt and they have evidence that the school district received it. It's not something that you want to email because it could get lost, but you do have a paper trail then and a timestamp showing that you sent it. But that certified mail is really the best because then you can keep a hard copy in your file. You can attach your certified mail receipt to it showing that they received it and then have that in your files. So and on my website, there's a template for an NOI. So if people want to use that, they can just download it, change their name, put their family's personal information into it, and then send it off. And one thing too, that I didn't mention earlier that I should have, what some people will say, and what I think what the law stipulates is that they can actually put date of birth or age. And the reason why I do not recommend putting date of birth is because when a school district sees a date of birth, then what they're going to do is automatically assign that child to where they would put them in the school system in the grade level. And then they're going to say that they need assessments at certain times, where if you just have an age, they don't know what grade level you've assigned them to or what you're doing, because sometimes kids, they're not just in third grade. They're not just in fourth grade. You can have a third grader, like what Keely just said, you can have a third grader whose reading could possibly be in the 8th, 9th, 10th grade reading level, but maybe they're not as strong in math or science. And so maybe they're in second grade science, but they're, like I said, in like 8th grade reading. So we want to keep that so that the parents are issuing the tests and assessments according to either state law, when they say state law is in grades 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11, or when the umbrella school says to do that. So what we've seen happen is in a couple different school districts, the parent had the date of birth. And so the school district would say, okay, your child is in third grade. You better turn this assessment in, or we're going to cause problems for you. We're going to be reporting you for truancy and investigating your records. When in reality, they have them in second grade or they have them in fourth grade. But because the date of birth is what the school district says is third grade or fifth grade or whatever it is, they demand the assessments. So I'm sorry, that's kind of off track from what you said, but nobody needs to go in anywhere to homeschool.
That's pretty important. I was going to ask you too, are any parents trying to address the health effects from all the wireless devices that are around in the schools?
In the schools? I'm going to let Christine speak to that because this is her big topic. It's a topic for me too, but I've never seen anybody fight back.
I know. And Virginia, you and I are in very frequent contact on this topic. And sadly, I agree with Colleen that I don't see many things happening to get the schools wired. And I might ask Keely, actually, I believe you said that your husband is in the IT department at a public school. If do you know, has he ever mentioned or have you ever talked about the health impacts from wireless technology? And especially with children who are more vulnerable with their thinner skulls and their blood-brain barriers still developing and holding laptops on their laps, it affects fertility. Not a good deal. The effects are cumulative. So very serious. And we want to get the schools wired, and get away from the wireless. Have you ever talked with him? Or are you open to chatting with him about that, maybe?
Yeah, that's a great point. And honestly, I have, I know about that. And, I've done a fair amount of research on it as well. And, I have not actually spoken to my husband about that, but that is a really great point. And I know, as he's mentioned, the initiatives of, how certain schools are moving in the districts and they're moving to like one device per student. That's a very real issue. And so that's a great point. I think I will bring that up to him and speak with him about it and kind of see if there's anyone who is, looking at this from a kind of health perspective, because I honestly think that probably not.
All right.
And that's scary.
Well, thank you for being open to that and having done some research to know about what we're talking about here. And it's a tough sell because, it's invisible. And so many people will think, well, I use these all the time and I'm fine. And, until they're not, and because it is cumulative, it's been contributing to many conditions. So I'm going to post a link to an interview series I had with a world leading authority on this topic, Professor Olle Johansson. And we talk on that very topic. And also I've spoken with the founders of the National Association for Children and Safe Technology. And we talk about that as well. So on my Zips Media YouTube channel is where I have most of my work. I'm expanding onto other platforms like BitChute and Rumble. And I started a school on Facebook called Wired Schools, and where there are lots of folks who are interested in that. But maybe, an upcoming meeting, maybe even next month, we'll invite an expert. Maybe Olle might be able to join us. That would be wonderful to talk about that, and people can ask him questions. So does that sound like a good idea?
Yes.
Sounds
Okay.
fantastic.
All
Chris,
right.
can I also mention to the ladies, I actually won a lawsuit against the FCC. You can look it up. It's the Children's Health Defense Council with Robert Kennedy Jr. You can look it up. It's August 13th of 2021. We won a lawsuit, and basically at the end of the lawsuit, this was over health effects from wireless radiation. And basically it's telling the industry can no longer claim that wireless devices are even safe. So this is where we're at right now.
Virginia, I'm so glad you mentioned that. And also, I interviewed Virginia a few years ago. She was featured in an award-winning film called Take Back Your Power by Josh Del Sol, which is primarily about the topic of so-called smart meters, but they emit radiation, as do wireless devices and everything. So it's all related. But sadly, Virginia lost a son back in 2008 to this technology. So she's been on the advocacy path ever since. So she is quite the expert on it as well. And I would love to invite her to be a guest speaker when we set this up. I think I'm going to make this for next month. I think that would be wonderful. And I do have a comment here from Doe Kelly. She's needing to leave the meeting. So she asked me if I would mention that she's saying they had an experience in the public middle school in Longmont, Colorado with a principal, and was that the brainwashing is nearly complete in the use of this wireless technology for learning. She, the principal, glazed over after her associate Kim addressed her concerns. She's really informed for about a half hour and brought them information on the topic. It seems a huge awareness campaign is needed, and we're talking about what can be done here in Longmont. And Doe, thank you for all of your work with that. And I know you've been very active about raising awareness about the so-called smart meters as well. So that's very important, and we'd like to maybe invite you to join us next month if you can. And Kimberly. So if you'll send me some information about Kimberly, that will be great.
If you file a notice of intent, you have to have those vaccine records on file. And if they were to demand your records, you would have to submit those as well. What you can do, though, is keep a letter, as long as they're not enrolled in a public homeschool enrichment program or any kind of public school program, you can still write a letter saying, we're claiming our exemption, like we're not doing this. If you participate in any kind of a public homeschool program, then you have to comply with the requirements from SB 163 that was passed in 2020. Now you can go through an umbrella school, and we don't even collect those. I don't collect that information for my families. I don't think that there are any umbrellas that do. There are some umbrellas that might make you file an exemption form with them, but I don't want to know. It's not my business what your family does with your medical decisions. I don't ask you. You don't share that information with me. It's non-existent as far as I'm concerned. It's just until you want to register with a public program for any reason, then you have to either comply with the schedule. And if you're not in compliance with the schedule, then you have to either do the non-medical exemption form that goes through the re-education module on CDPHE's website, and they collect your family's data. And I'm talking through this fast because I think you said she had to go, so I'm covering this really, really quickly. If you do
it's all recorded, and she will hear you. Yes.
Okay. If you do the online re-education module, they do collect your data, and so I don't recommend doing that. Because, like I said, data privacy is a really big deal to me. You can do the non-medical exemption form that you can print out, and then you can have an MD, DO, PA, NP, a pharmacist or an RN sign, if you can find one who's willing to sign it, and you can turn that into your school, and it's supposed to be protected by FERPA rights. However, last year in October, I don't know, it was the first, second, or third. It was the first week of October. Governor Polis signed an executive order in the name of COVID that took all of those forms from the schools and required the schools to turn those into CDPHE. So they still got that data. So everybody needs to know, full disclosure, so you know exactly what you're dealing with. If you enroll in one of those public school system, enroll in programs, part-time classes, anything you do, you're going to have to comply with that. And even if you turn in a form, if you can find a doctor who will sign it or another professional who is qualified to sign it, and they sign it, they have stolen that data at the state level before, and I anticipate they would do it again. So go in with it with caution, knowing that they can do an executive order to take that data, even though they're not supposed to do it. So just so you know full well what you're possibly getting into. And if you have questions on that, you can reach out to me. We can schedule a phone call, and I'll answer any questions that you have and explain all of it to you, so you know how to have enough information. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you can have enough information to make a well-educated decision for your family.
Fantastic. Colleen, I told you she was a wealth of information.
Thank
We
you.
were so lucky to connect with her over the last 2 years. And if I might say, I mean, to Virginia's point that she mentioned about her granddaughter, the young lady we helped homeschool these past 2 years, she just turned 9. And we weren't able to continue with homeschooling beyond what we've already done because our plans are a little up in the air. But she was wanting to herself. She loved the experience with us. She learned a lot. We really made great advancements, and she enjoyed it very much. But she too felt like she was missing out on not being with her friends. And so, and her mom had said that she knows a lot about the dark side of a government school exposure. But she said, we're very close. I feel confident that whatever comes up, that we'll be able to, she tells me everything, we'll be able to cover everything and address her concerns, and everything will be fine. Well, I certainly hope that's the case. But Colleen, I did want to ask you, I had a thought, and I wondered if when children say that they want to be with their friends, when parents say, I'm worried about socialization, do you believe that they don't really realize that just how, they're so restricted? As I understand, I don't have children, don't have access to what really goes on in the public school system, but I heard that there are restrictions for the children, that especially back when they were doing the ridiculous mandates and the social distancing and the face diapers and all of that. How close can they be with their friends when they have to be 6 feet away and stand in line and they can't talk and all of that? And we're in a homeschool environment. You can interact, have play dates and dance classes and music classes and all other opportunities to be with other kids and the co-ops. So I think maybe they just don't know what all the freedoms they might have in more of a homeschool, unschooled situation. What do you think?
I agree with that. I think that people still don't understand what homeschooling is really like. And when people say, well, what about socialization? I honestly have a hard time keeping a straight face, because It just shows how totally ignorant they are. And they really don't understand homeschooling, because there are so many things available for homeschooling now. It's to the point where you have to really work hard to decide what you're going to say no to, so that you have enough time to stay at home and actually do your schoolwork. And another thing that I don't think that people might always understand is how fulfilling the relationship can be between a parent and a child when you can actually talk through those things. And I'll just say this, I think that if somebody can pull off deprogramming what the child has gotten in school all day long, more power to them. But the reality is, when a child is in a school setting for 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day, and they're getting a constant message, and those people are the authority in their life and they're the expert in their life, by the time they get home to mom and dad after hearing it all day long, mom and dad are no longer in the position of being primary educators and guides in the child's life. So my kids and I spend a lot of time talking about a lot of things. And that may or may not even come out of a book. It might be things that we're seeing in the news and things that are happening. And we're having very deep discussions. It takes a lot of time and energy and effort to do that. And by the end of the day, I don't know. I know at the end of the day, my kids and I were pretty tired, and we're not really up for philosophical conversations about what the real meaning is of what's going on. You know what I mean? I just don't believe that can really happen. I think that people also don't understand how rewarding it can be when you're close proximity with parent and child, and that relationship and the bonds that can form. You do have to be intentional to get them time with other kids. And that's something you need to put effort into, and that's important. So then do that. Like, it's easy to schedule play dates if you find good friends. I think the hardest part is finding good friends. That's the hard part, I think, for adults and children, are finding the quality friends that you can share life with. And that is worth making the effort to do. And if you can't, if the kid is at school and they really can't formulate those good friendships, isn't it better for them to be with a parent who loves them and wants to share all their wisdom with them? Another thing too, with the whole socialization thing, where in life, where in the world do we line up according to our age groups and only participate in activities according to our age groups? It doesn't happen in work. It doesn't happen when we're going out our business around town. It doesn't happen anywhere where we're only with people who have birthdays within the same date range of our own. And homeschool kids, I find, many people find, it's a common knowledge out there with homeschool kids, they have a great ability to speak to kids of other ages. They are far more comfortable in conversation, talking about a broader range of subjects because they're spending more time reading and pursuing their interests and learning things that they're passionate about and finding common ground with people and talking to somebody at the grocery store and making small talk, talking to somebody at the post office and engaging in conversation. I will, to my dying day, say that homeschoolers are better socialized than kids coming out of public schools. And I've seen it with my eyes. I've seen it with friends that we have where their kids are in public schools. I've seen it where my kids are interacting with other kids. So you just have to find the place to make your community. You have to be intentional and put in the effort to make or find or build a community.
One thing I wanted to share too with our observation with our homeschooler, we get together occasionally socially, and our homeschooler is so open with us, laughing. I mean, she's quite the screamer, and we have fun together. I mean, she calls me Miss Fancy, and my husband Principal Whiny Boy, and there's a lot of learning going on, but she gets influence at home where an authority figure will insist that she be a good girl. It kind of comes from her upbringing, that when we're together with her and her parental type authorities, that she's a different person. She's so pulled into herself and so shy. And sometimes I'll say, hey, are you in there? You're acting so different. We don't really recognize you. I'm fine. But it's like, wow, that's just amazing. And, children, like you say, Colleen, if they're more exposed to all ranges of ages and genders and adults, they're comfortable speaking with adults, especially adults who talk with them like adults and they don't talk down to them, and all of that great information. And like you say, no one is going to care for their child, a stranger behind these doors that they don't really even let parents into the schools anymore much, like to just sit in and watch a class. I don't think that's happening much anymore. So yeah, things are upside down, and they're trying to drive division between the parents, and they want to be the parent. The school wants to be a parent. They want to be universal, everything, handle their medical care and all of that. And they kind of drive home maybe the subtle message that, oh, you don't need to share this with mom and dad. They wouldn't understand. They don't really understand what's happening in the world these days. So you don't need to ask them those questions. So, yeah.
Well, can I ask a question? What do you do for sports if your child wants to get involved with sports?
There are homeschool sports leagues, especially there's the Denver Eagles is a big one in the Denver area, and they compete against all the high schools. So there are lots of different school sports programs out there, or if they want to, they can also go through the public school system just for sports if they want to do that. So it's possible to play through a public school team as a homeschooler. They have the right to do that if they want to.
Okay.
That's really great. I didn't realize that, Colleen. That's really good to know. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well,
and then my last question was, this gets a little deep, and Chris and I know about this stuff, but the curriculum and everything else that's going on, are the parents aware that the United Nations and the World Economic Forum are in charge of all this?
They have no idea.
But do you know that they are?
Yes, I did know, but parents
Okay.
in general have no idea.
Yeah, I really think that if parents kind of knew how deep this really is, that they would change, they would absolutely get their kids out of school at that point.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point to bring up. I had a recorded conversation with Alex Newman and Dr. Duke Pesta, and we did talk about the UN's influence, as well as I interviewed John Klyczek about his book, School World Order. He definitely talks about the fascistic privatization of the education system. So, and as you know, I did a conversation recently with Patrick Wood and a few others. We're talking about getting the U.S. out of the UN out of the U.S. And it's not going to happen overnight. It got to keep chipping away. But it all comes back to the big agenda, doesn't it? The Agenda 21, 2030, et cetera. But I don't know that we really need to go into it more deeply on that, but I'm hoping people will do their own research to look into the influences of the United Nations on our public education system. And they should find a lot of information. Again, don't believe our words, research our words, make up your own decision. So on what's right for your family. So, well, everyone, I think we have really covered a great deal in this last some 90 minutes. So any final words, questions before we wrap it up?
I want to thank everybody. It was very informative.
Thank you, Virginia, for participating. That was wonderful. And Colleen, thank you for being a speaker today. And to Alex Newman, you both did such a wonderful job. So I would like to thank our viewers who are looking at this information. And please, if you found it worthwhile, to help us expand this reach of this message, would you kindly click on like, subscribe, share, and post a comment. That will really help us reach more people. And that's what it's all about. So thank you very much. And if you would like to join our SAGS group, I'm going to invite you to send me an email. I'll include that in the show notes, and just ask to be added to our email list. We keep it confidential, and you'll know when our next meetings are coming up. So thank you very much again to everyone. This was fabulous.
Thank you,
Thank you, Chris.
Christine.
Okay, bye for now.